Hi folks, today we're going to install some amp research bed steps. First things first, the amp folks have already done a video for you. It was done by the folks at Motors, M-O-T-O-R-Z, and if we will post that video along with this one, link to that so you can look over the professional video. We're going to take you through the amateur video. The difference between the two, the Motors folks will have you do all the things correctly, as in safety glasses, disconnect batteries, etc., etc. They'll take you through opening up the box and making sure all the parts are there. We assume you can handle those basics. We're going to get into some of the finer points of the installation, things that the Motors video will not touch upon, some, if you will, some of the lessons that we learned the hard way. So, truly, when you do open the amp box, the parts are there. You can lay them out. You can get them organized. I suggest that you do. There are quite a few different items that make up their kit, but it is professionally put together. Let's open up and we'll get started. The key thing that we get is, as we open up the box, the instructions. And as a part of this video, really the simplest thing I think for me to do is to go through the instructions step by step, highlighting those areas where here's where we learned something that we can transfer over to you to make your job easier. Aside from that, we're going to make the big assumption that you know how to read and you know how to follow instructions. And hey guys, I know how it is to follow instructions. Sometimes it's one of the most difficult items that you have to do in any installation. So, box is here, parts are here. Let's start learning a little bit. Alright, opening up the instructions, page 1 and 2, it jumps right into the motors and the assembly of the motor to the linkage. Like to put just a small bead of silicone on this side, put it in place, and the only reason I draw your attention to this page is that the motors do line up on the linkages different. On the driver's side, you can see the motor is pointed at about the 4 o'clock position. On the passenger side, the motor linkage will be in the 12 o'clock position. There's really only one way. You can't screw it up, but again, lessons learned the hard way. If you're laying underneath the truck trying to put these motors and linkage assemblies on, and you can't get it to line up for whatever reason, and you're trying to put the motors on and it doesn't want to work, that's because you bypassed page 2 of the instructions, which clearly show you which way these are oriented. Well, thankfully there are only 14 pages of instructions. We've already covered 2. Pages 3 and 4 we're going to skip over really fast. 4 would be to lay out all the different parts that come with the kit. And now let's go to page 5, which is going to tell us to disconnect the emergency brake cable. And as we move back here to the vehicle, we'll show you why. The instructions are going to tell you to release the parking brake cable so that you can mount the cable higher up front. The need to do that is if you raise the level on the front, it raises the level of the back, and the back now no longer will interfere when the step is closed. So yes, we do have to release the parking brake cable. We're going to do that starting with this adjustment screw right here, and it's kind of painstaking because you only get a quarter of a turn each time you do the wrench. I found that it took about a half of an inch of threaded rod here to get everything slack enough to where I could make the release. The release being right back here if you pull hard enough. And as you've finally gotten enough slack into the cable, you can find you can disconnect the parking brake and move to the front to make the adjustment and put the extra bracket in called for in the instructions. Again, this is lessons learned the hard way. We're going to install this bracket to move the parking brake cable up higher. Alright, so we have to release the bracket, or we have to release the parking brake, and as you can see from the factory, it's not slotted like the amp research bracket. So you got to get in here. Thankfully the top clip is already underneath, and all I have to do is push on the bottom clip and the cable comes out of the hole. Okay, great, we've got the cable out of the hole. Now how do we get this big assembly? Okay, time to stop and regroup for lessons learned the hard way part 2. Yep, it's called lessons learned the hard way. Again, we've got to get this cable loose. So how do you do that? Oh, there's a little tang right there. So pop that tang down. So as you spin this around, now you can move the cable forward, down, and out. Now the cable will come out of the bracket. Alright, we've put the relocation bracket on, and now again, since the bracket is slotted, we can slide the cable back down through and push the cable out until the tangs engage. Time to put the cable back into place. Again, this is lessons learned the hard way. I really don't want to do this twice, so I've cheated on you. I've already installed the cable back there to the back. Now let's just take and try a power move and see if we can get the cable to come forward and only make one connection up here in the front. Got it. How about that? This next step is one of the most frustrating. We're going to install these reinforcement plates in back of this access hole that the factory has already put into place. Nice thing about the amp steps is you can see the factory has already drilled this 6-sided hole. It's going to match up to this 6-sided hole in the reinforcement plate. The most difficult part of this though is going to be to fish this down and back while being careful not to drop it. So, okay, as you can see, the folks at RAM have already pre-drilled the 6-sided holes where the expandable rivets will go in, or the expandable nuts will go in. They had not drilled this hole here for the pop rivet, which keeps the plate in place. So in order to do that, previously I'd held this template, held the support bracket up as a template and marked it with a punch or either a black magic marker, and then I had drilled the 1/8 inch hole. Again, from the lessons learned the hard way department, we've got the expandable nuts covered up with some masking tape to keep them from falling out. We've got the pop rivet in place, and now it's just time to squeeze and pop. The next thing we want to do is make sure the rivet nuts pull tight, and reading from the instruction sheet, it says we need to give these 4 full turns. So I've got a 15mm wrench on the back side and 4 full turns. It's going to be quite a bit of turning to get that rivet nut to collapse. Remember a while back we went fishing, this tang was hanging outside. Later on in the instructions you will read, but we may as well do it now. Later in the instructions you will read to push this tang back in. Let's do it now while we're thinking about it, because with the tang, again, voice of experience, with the tang hanging on the outside lip, when you go to put your bracket on, it won't hang flush. You'll scratch your head and wonder why, only to find later in the instructions it told you to push the tang inside the cavity. The next step in the instructions from the amp folks will give you a template that you can use to drill the 2 holes that are already there. I think I'll reflect back to one of the original statements. This is a Mopar accessory that can be installed at the Mopar Chrysler dealerships. The holes are already there. Thankfully we don't have to do any drilling, and thankfully using their template, doing all the folds and the bends called for in the template, everything lines up from the 6-sided holes that they had given us there for the expandable rivets to the 2 holes that we'll use to hang the bracket. Back to the lessons learned the hard way. As you can see, we have 3 locations here on the idler arm, only 2 bolts. How are we going to do this? Read the instructions. I hate to say it, but I did. Alright, so we flip the idler arm around the other way. The center one is blind. It hangs over the bolt that we installed. Your next bolt comes out here and goes into the rivet. And then if you'll look on the front side, sure enough, those two holes that were drilled from the factory on the front are right there in place for us to install the locating nuts and bolts on the outside. And looking from the outside of the vehicle, here's what the two mounting bolts look like from the outside. Alright, 1/4 turn by 1/4 turn, we're going to tighten down the 13mm bolts that hold the front motor support bracket on. Painstaking, isn't it? Alright, earlier in the video we showed you the orientation of the drive motors to the linkage, but at that time it was not time to put the motors into place. Now it is. We left the motors off so that we can move the linkage forward and backward again so that you could get to the 13mm bolts that had to be screwed in. We've got those in, we've got the linkage tight. Extend the arm all the way down, and now the motor will go into place. You see we've used some electrical tape, some masking tape to hold the dust shield in place. Now the motor will fit in. Now with the motor at the 12 o'clock position, as mentioned earlier in the video, we drop in our 4mm bolts at the 3 locations. Again, note that the arm is all the way down. This is important as we do the wiring to the motor. We want it to be in the down position with the door open so that we can get the orientation of the swing step in place correctly. Alright, 2 bolts will go into this sliding linkage, and the sliding linkage will fit down into both the idler arm and the drive arm. It's just a matter of lining everything up and getting it seated correctly, then putting the 2 bolts in the front, 2 bolts in the rear to hold the step on. Right, the wiring for the amp steps is pretty simple. We simply need to run a wiring harness to the passenger and the driver's side. Okay. From the amp research control module, you have 4 wiring harness pieces. Again, passenger side, driver's side. You need 12-volt power that'll tap right straight into the battery positive. 12-volt negative goes to the battery terminal also. And the 4th leg will run through the firewall into the interior. It will go through the firewall at the same location. There's a rubber grommet that holds the parking brake cable, and we're going to just pass into the interior, pick up the signals from each of the 4 doors, signaling the steps to raise and lower. We'll do those T-taps in the interior. That'll be coming up next. The amp folks would have you do the wiring connections for the door opening and closings inside the interior underneath this knee bolster panel, and tucked up underneath the dash itself are a bunch of wiring clusters. Certainly you can pull this knee bolster panel off. There are 2 Phillips heads that hold it down in place down there, and then it just pops off with some plastic clips. Certainly that's one way to get access, but still, if you ask me, it's a little bit cumbersome and bulky. We did some research on the internet to find that an easier way to locate the wiring bundles is to pull up this side panel, and it just pulls up. There are plastic clips down here on the bottom. Pulls up and pulls back, and then from there you can get a fork and disconnect the rubber covering over the carpet panel, then pull back on the carpet panel to unveil the wiring connections that we'll need to make, that are again a lot easier than what the amp folks will tell you to do. But the purpose of this part of the video is just to show you how easy it is to remove this panel. Pull back, pull up, plastic panel comes off with just some metal clips that hold it in. Alright, as we mentioned several times before, this is a video also known as Lessons Learned the Hard Way. We've got our amp research running board on, installed in the front and the rear. and we wanted to show you how it operates when everything has been done correctly. So if you close the door, you'll see there's a time delay, and then the step goes up and tucks underneath. Alright, this is a problem that you may encounter though. There's a internal circuit breaker, for lack of a better word, on the amp control module that will keep this step. If there's anything holding it up or interfering with its pathway, it will keep the step from coming down. And if you'll open the door, I'll show you exactly what I mean. With that little of amount of force, the step won't come down. Close the door, let's let it go back up. There's the time delay. It'll go back up and tuck under. So as you're test fitting the step to make sure that it operates correctly, you may encounter that it hangs up underneath. And just a second, we'll take the video around and show you some of the tab places where it can interfere. Likewise, if you open the door, step comes down, and then it, if you don't have it adjusted just right, it will hit this pinch rail as it goes back up. Sometimes it will go back down into place. Sometimes it will just stay in that position. So some fine-tuning things that you'll have to do with the running board step if you encounter these different situations, again, where it doesn't go up or down correctly. One last note, you'll drive yourself crazy, but don't think if it doesn't go back and forth without interference, don't think that you've done something incorrectly and you've got to change the location of the motor. You must have done the motor wrong, or you must have done the gearing wrong. Trust me, you didn't. Again, it's the internal circuit breaker on the amp control module that's not going to let it go down or up until it's got a smooth transition or a smooth pathway for the transition. We'll move next to the video camera showing you underneath the truck, showing you where this step can hang up. Alright, we showed you the video of the step going down and up from the outside of the vehicle. Let's show you from underneath. If you'll open the door, again, that much force will keep the step from coming all the way down, and door back up. Time delay, step goes back up. Open door, all the way. Now folks, you can see some mistakes that we made. Early on, when we were adjusting this of the running boards, we had some interference, and we took the good old 5-pound hammer. The interference points were the pinch rails. There are 3 of them coming down the side. They have some locations where the metal is back toward the inside of the drive shaft, toward the inside of the vehicle. You can see how we made the adjustment. Really not proud of that handiwork. And you learn on one side, what you learn on one side, you can make or do correctly on the other. On the passenger side, we did not use the 5-pound hammer. Rather, we made some adjustments to the boards. How, you might ask? Well, we got a big heavy guy to stand on the front and a big heavy guy to stand on the rear, and we kind of got the board to settle in. Brandon, if you close the door, please. Got the board to settle in to where when it came back to that location, it wasn't hitting these pinch, these dents that came outward. Likewise, this board on its trajectory will come down and then go out. Okay, so now it didn't have anything to interfere. Once we made the adjustment, it didn't have anything to interfere with as it went down. Open again, please, and close. Time delay, and back up it goes. But again, any interference in its pathway and it will stop. You'll have to make adjustments. It's nice to have 3 people to help you with this. 1 to open the door, 2 to lay underneath the truck and go, okay, we need to move a little something here, need to move a little something there, or those same 2 people to say, okay, let's stand on the running board and see if we can get it to adjust out by putting a load on it.